teach you on the truth that will change your life, will change your destiny, will change your entire families. Principles are more powerful than principalities. There are people that rebuke demons all day but violate principles all week. There are people who fast and pray but refuse discipline, structure, financial intelligence, and then excellence. And then they wonder why nothing actually changes. Listen carefully. Demons can attack, but principles will always rule out outcomes. Even in scripture, God does not only give power, He gives laws, He gives patterns and systems. Then through wisdom, a house is built, according to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 3. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. There are things you don't cast out. There are things you have to learn. When you learn, you apply them and then you submit to them. So talking about principles, what are principles? Principles are timeless truths. They are universal laws, predictable cause and effect patterns. They work for Christians, they work for non-Christians, they work for Africans, Europeans, they work for young and then old. Gravity doesn't care whether you are powerful or not. Electricity doesn't respond to tongues, it responds to laws. The principle of sowing and reaping is not only about offering, it's about life. Spend more than you earn in debt. Eat everything you earn, then you are moving to poverty. Dishonor people and then know for sure that they are going to be closed doors. If you procrastinate, of course you are going to be stagnated. Procrastination is equal to stagnation. Principles do not respect your emotions, they respect application. What are principalities? Principalities refer to negative spiritual forces. These are demonic resistances. They are inherited patterns and invisible attacks on destiny. Yes, these are real. They are real. The Bible acknowledges this. It says in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12, it says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood." But here's the truth. Principalities can hinder progress, but broken principles will guarantee failure in your life. Let me take it again. That principalities can hinder your progress, but broken principles will guarantee failure, even without demons. If you ignore budgeting, you refuse to learn, you refuse to be disciplined, you despise mentorship, you don't need the devil to fail. You are already on the path to failure. The big revelation is that principles sustain what prayer opens. When you pray, God opens doors for you. But it is the principles you apply that will maintain the door to be opened. Prayer opens doors, but principles keep them open. Prayer can make people like you. Prayer can make you receive favor. Prayer can make you be pushed into certain corridors of power. But then principles make them respect and trust you. Prayer can give you opportunities. Principles help you manage opportunities. Miracles can lift you, but principles keep you lifted. Samson had anointing, but violated principles. Joseph had principles, and then he rose to the top. David was anointed, but structured the kingdom. Solomon prayed, but also applied wisdom. Scripture that teaches principle. When you read Proverbs, you get to know wisdom, diligence, planning. Genesis chapter 4, verse 41. It talks about Joseph's story. Matthew chapter 25, there's the parable of talents, which talks about productivity, growth, and then responsibility. And then when you look into Luke chapter 14, verse 28, it says, count the cost, which refers to planning. 7 principles more powerful than principalities. I'm going to take my time and talk about this. 7 principles more powerful than principalities. Number 1, the principle of responsibility. Nothing changes until you say, I am responsible for my results. Blame keeps you stuck, but the responsibility gives you control. The day you decide that from today I'm going to be accountable for every decision I make, for every action I take, then it means you are taking hold of your life. You are applying the principle of responsibility. Right in the Garden of Eden, you realize that God gives Adam responsibility. He tells him, you are to take care of this whole Eden I've given to you. Make sure that everything is in order. Make sure that you don't eat this, you don't eat that. That is the responsibility given to mankind right from creation. So you have a responsibility. It is a duty that you must, you have a duty to play. If you want to have a successful future, you are responsible for it. The principle number 2 is the principle of value. Value is not emotional. It is an exchange of value. Money is not emotional. It is an exchange of value. Increase value and increase your income. Scripture says, as soon as Pharaoh realized that the boy Joseph had value. As soon as Pharaoh realized that the boy Joseph could give him value, he made sure that he elevated him. So there's a position or there's a version of you right now that will not have access to certain things because you have not increased your value. Proverbs 22 verse 29 says, diligent man will always stand before kings. And then principle number 3 is the principle of honor. Honor opens doors prayer cannot. There's honor closes doors fasting cannot even open. There's honor closes doors fasting cannot reopen. Honor God, honor people, honor processes. Principle number 4 is the principle of consistency. Small actions repeated becomes greatness, not intensity, consistency. And Galatians chapter 6 verse 9, it talks about do not be weary in well doing. And then principle number 5 is the principle of mentorship. What you learn in 10 years, mentorship can teach you in 10 months. Pride makes people repeat avoidable mistakes. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 14, it says, in the multitude of counselors there is safety. In the multitude of counselors there is safety. The principle of structure, that's number 6. Business collapses without systems. It collapses without records, delegation, and processes. Prayer cannot replace poor management. There are times where Christians forget or don't have any idea of the importance of having structures, systems in their businesses. So there are things that for you to get to your next level, it can only happen when there's a structure to which you are following. And the principle number 7, that's the most important. That's the principle of seed and harvest. Your habits are seeds. Your actions are seeds. Your affirmations are seeds. Your relationships are seeds. What you sow, you will reap. What you sow, you will reap. So balancing prayer and principles. You don't replace prayer with principles. Neither do you replace principles with prayer. You have to do both. You must have a balance. You pray for favor and then you work with excellence. You break spiritual barriers and then you build financial intelligence. You speak in tongues and then you also count all the cost. You understand it? It's very important to have a balance in your life. When you have a balance in your life, you don't joke with the spirituality. Neither do you joke with the physical world. Even though the spirit controls the physical also has a role to play. Hear me. Your life in 2026 will be determined not only by what you pray for, but by what you practice. God is not just a miracle worker. He's a God of systems. He's a God of order, structure, and principles. As long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest shall not cease. That is in Genesis chapter 8, verse 22. You don't need a new... We are almost done with the first half of the year. It is your responsibility to make sure that the last 6 months in 2026, you are going to make use of it by applying these principles that I've stated.